Hello everybody, this is Jono. I hope you're all safe and sound wherever in the world you may be. Thank you for watching one of my YouTube videos. So today we're going to talk about how to create the ideal webinar landing page. Now, in this session, what I'm basically going to go through is a landing page of a real webinar that I ran. I'm going to show you the stats from that webinar so you know that it's some terrible underperforming webinar that actually did reasonably well. And then I'm going to go through bit by bit, step by step, how I put together that landing page and kind of the decision making that went into it. Because landing pages are a really, really critical part of how you run any kind of webinar. You can go and do as much advertising and promotion and social media and all of those other things about your webinar. But if the landing page doesn't grab them and interest them and offer a ton of value to them, they will not register. If they don't register, they don't come to your webinar. Okay, so it's possibly the most important piece of the overall webinar process. And it's something that a lot of people get wrong, including myself. I've sucked so many times at writing webinar landing pages. So I want to teach you what I've learned over the years. Okay. All right. So let's get right into it. So first of all, let's talk about the webinar that I ran to set a bit of a baseline. Okay. Now, it was basically a fairly specialist session. It was all about how to get your dream community job. It's designed for people who work in communities, who are community professionals, and they're thinking about going and getting their next gig. It might be becoming a director of community or becoming a community manager or an advocate. They may be at the beginning of their career. That's the kind of vibe I was going for. And what I wanted to do was to kind of put together a really super valuable 1 hour session where they can learn a ton and it can be really useful to them, okay? So that's the basic goal of it. Now, let me first of all give you a sense of how this thing performed, okay? Now, this is the data within Webinar Jam, which is the platform I used. Now, I had about just under a 30% sign-up rate. So people who came to this page, about 30% of them signed up and registered. And this was, as you can probably imagine, a bit of a fluctuating number. When I first put the page up, it was closer to kind of 20%. And then I made some changes and it went up to 24%, made some changes. And then ultimately it got up to about 28%. So this is a number I always want to kind of regularly look at. Now, be sure to click the link, right? Probably linked on this video somewhere. I'm not very good at YouTube. I'm still figuring this out, right? Because I actually recorded another video that walks through how to read this dashboard and the stats within it in Webinar Jam so you can learn more about kind of how to improve and optimize your webinars. Okay, so be sure to check that. But this session, just so you know, is not just about Webinar Jam. In fact, for example, my landing page here is running on my own website. It can run on any platform. It doesn't really matter what the software you're using is. This is more about content. So don't worry if you're not using Webinar Jam or WordPress in this case or whatever else, okay? Anyway, so about 28% of people signed up. About 43% of people actually showed up, which I was really thrilled about because generally I tend to want to get a 40 to 45% show up rate, a minimum of 30%, which industry seems to think 30% is kind of generally where you want to be at. But I want to go for 40 to 45%. But what I'm really proud about, if I go down here and just knock this up a little bit bigger, so those of you with iffy eyes can read, can see rather. There we go. You can see that the people who join the session, generally, pretty much most of them stay to the end. So what that tells me is that when they read this page and I was selling them a webinar, it's free, but I was selling them, that this was worth their hour, right, of their time, that when they came, most of them actually spent most of the time there. And if you see over here, 9 of the 41 who showed up gave it a 5-star rating. Everybody basically rated it 5 stars. So this tells me that I didn't sell them a dud. They showed up. The session was valuable. All right. All right, so I wanted to go through that just very briefly, just to make sure that you know that we're talking about a session that's actually, hopefully, good. Right? Okay. All right. So let's first of all start at the top. So, imagine that you've gone out there, you've done a ton of promotion on social media, on your blog, you may have gone on podcasts to promote your webinar, you put it on your website, you may have done some paid advertising, you've gone and done a ton of promotion around your webinar, right? And people come to this landing page. This is, as I said earlier on, this is the most important element of the whole process. And you want to make sure that when people come to this page, that you assume they don't know who you are and they don't know how interested they are in the topic. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because there will be some people who know who you are, people who follow you on social media, and there'll be some people who'll be like, I really care about this topic. This has come at the perfect time. I'm definitely going to register. And there'll be a small number of those people, right? But webinars are what I call top of funnel, right? So if your funnel's like this, around the top is people who are kind of like still figuring out whether they care about this topic, whether it's interesting to them, whether they should even participate in any kind of way. So in my example here with my webinar, let's go back to screen sharing. They're probably like, I can maybe see having a bit of a career change, or maybe thinking about going into a different role, or maybe trying to go for more of a senior role. They're kind of flirting with the idea, but they're not convinced. So this landing page is there to convince them that if they are flirting with the idea, that this is going to be a good use of their time. Now, the other element, before I get into this, again, just kind of more at a strategic level, is you may think an hour of their time isn't much to ask, right? If you think about all the work that you're doing, you're creating the content, you're doing the promotion, you're putting together the landing page, you're setting up your webinar platform, all that kind of good stuff, right? And you might think, well, it's only an hour of their time. What's the big deal? It's a real big deal, okay? People are distracted by a million things. They've got jobs to do. They've got families to take care of. They've got, hobbies that they want to pursue. So taking an hour of their time is a lot to ask. And we need to make sure that there is absolutely zero ambiguity in the value of them coming to your webinar, all right? All right, so let's go through it. Now, the first thing you'll see up here is a great big stonking old video. Now, this is, as you can tell, as you can probably tell, it's hosted on YouTube. I just put it on YouTube as an unlisted video. And the thing about videos is not everybody's going to watch it. Maybe 10 or 20% of people will watch it. But videos are a really good way of getting the information over, because it shows them you, right? They get to read your body language and hear your tonality, and it starts building the relationship, which is awesome. Okay, so I think I'd always recommend putting together a video. Now, you might not have the software or a camera. You can really, where is it? Look, this thing, okay, your cell phone, you can make a video on this, right? These come with video editing software. Even if you're just kind of like talking into it like that, blah, 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 webinar, great, come to my webinar. Just do it on your cell phone. You don't have to have a professional setup, right? I've got like a GoPro set up and proper lights and all the rest of it. And you can actually buy a lot of this stuff for relatively inexpensively. And there's free software out there for editing your videos, or you can use like more advanced stuff like Final Cut Pro. But definitely put together a video, because you can also use that in your social media promotion as well and elsewhere. Now, I actually want to go through this video. I'm going to skip over a chunk of it that's not relevant, but I want to talk about how I structured the content in the video, because it was very intentional in helping people to sign up and encouraging people to sign up. So let's first of all watch this video. All right.
Hi everyone, this is John O'Bacon. Now, let me ask you a quick question. Are you really excited about building communities, but you're just not entirely sure how to take that next step in your career? Maybe you want to go and run a whole community team.
Press the wrong button. I thought spacebar would do it, but spacebar apparently bamboozles your way down the page. Now, this first piece is really important to note, to point out, that because what I'm doing is I'm basically asking them a series of questions. Like, are you interested in taking that next step in your career, but you're kind of confused about what to do? I'm asking this within the first 10 or 12 seconds of the video, because I want to make sure that the viewer's curiosity and interest is aligned with what I can provide, okay? The last thing you ever want to do with anything, whether it's a video, whether it's an email, whether it's an event, is convince people of something, and then when they show up, they're like, well, what is this? I don't want this. This is not what I was expecting, because then that ends up in a really disappointing situation, okay? So you want to make sure that you're completely aligned. So this first part here is just making sure that we're on the same page.
Team. Maybe you want to be a community manager, or out there on the road as a community advocate and evangelist. Or maybe you're right at the beginning of your career and not sure how to take that important first step. Now,
all right. So at this point, what I'm basically going through right now is all these different, possible options in terms of where people are in their career. Some people are at the beginning of their career. Some people want to kind of step up to be more of a direct level. Some people want to be evangelists and advocates. Some people are thinking about switching careers, because a lot of people are going to be like, this session sounds interesting, but I don't know whether it's right for me. Does it match what I want to do? And I deliberately designed this session, my webinar, to apply to pretty much everybody. Okay. So I wanted to get that clear up front. Now, the next bit, you can see this is starting to pan over. This is the Community Leadership Summit, an event that I run every year. This is now where I start sealing in my credibility, because I need to get over to them that I know what I'm talking about. Because why should they spend an hour of their time listening to some random dude on the internet? Now, this dude might be very good looking, have a delicious, English accent, and a distinct lack of hair, of course. But why should they listen to me? So I need to get my credentials over, and my goal is to do it in a way that doesn't sound like an egotistical asshole. I want to come across as pretty genuine, okay?
Now, I've been building communities now for over 20 years. I used to lead community for Ubuntu, GitHub, and XPRIZE. And as a consultant, I work with a broad variety of companies from all kinds of different industries. I've even written a couple of books on the subject.
All right, now, this is important. So when I went through that, I wasn't saying like, you know, I'm the greatest person that's ever walked this earth. You should listen to me. I'm not leaning against Lamborghinis like all of those marketing gurus. You know, I'm just matter of fact going through my experience in, 10 seconds to kind of get that over. Now, the other thing that's really important here is you can see these two books. These are two books that I've written, People Powered and the Art of Community. The reason why I'm mentioning these is not just for the credibility piece, but I'm actually going to be giving away a couple of free chapters as a perk of the webinar. So I wanted to get that, the People Powered piece up front as well.
I have a completely free webinar that I think will be really interesting to you.
Now, here's the thing. Let me go back a bit. You'll notice here that this says completely free webinar in giant text, right? And also at the beginning, where is it? Here, we had how to take that next step in your career. All right. The reason why I have this big old text here is because, first of all, it's visually striking. So it's interesting and you want to kind of keep people engaged. But also a lot of people are going to be watching this on mobile. So if you have tiny little bits of text, they're not going to be able to read it. So make sure your text is big, okay? So now I'm talking about, by the way, that the webinar is completely free, and I'm now starting to get into the offering.
Be really interesting to you, especially if you're looking for that next step in your career. The webinar...
All right, now at this point, I'm going to go through what I call the menu.
Is completely packed with information. I want to make sure that you make the most out of every minute you spend there. I touch on the different community roles that are out there and what employers are looking for in hiring those roles. Importantly, I also cover what they're not.
All right, I'm not going to go through all of this because I don't want to bore you, but I'm listing these. You can see that this is a little bit of on-screen graphics, right? Which I just made in Keynote and then overlaid it. I screen recorded it and overlaid it when I was using Final Cut Pro. But like a big chunk of this is all this stuff, right? This is going through, 2 layers of content, two layers of 2 rounds of bullet points rather. So this is all about getting over to them that, okay, we're on the same page in terms of the topic and what's interesting. There's my credentials. Here's all the material I'm going to be sharing completely for free, okay?
That you put together when they offer you the role. Now, this is a 1-hour session. It's jam-packed with super practical guidance, so make sure you bring a notepad. But I'm also going to send you some additional bonus material to get you started. First of all...
Now, this is important, okay? So take notes on this one. When you do a webinar, if you only go through the content and talk about the content, which I just went through, that will keep them interested, but you want to make sure you've got bonuses, right? So for example, in this one, I'm going to give away the free resume template, right?
Well, there's going to be the downloadable resume template that I mentioned earlier on. Secondly, I'm also going to send
this one as well, I think is really important.
You a downloadable guide that's packed with tips and tricks that you can use throughout the entire process. So you've got that on hand.
Now, the reason why I did this was I thought when people are going through the recruitment process, wouldn't it be super handy if they had like a 7 or 10 page guide with loads of little recommendations at different points through the process, that they can print out and they can take. It doesn't take me a lot of time to put that content together, but again, this is a useful additional bonus that I can include in the session.
I'm also going to follow up with a raft of additional guidance and practical recommendations and video material that you can use to continue along your community journey. And of course, it's a webinar, so there's going to be a whole load of Q&A where you can get answers to your questions.
Now, that's really important. Definitely talk about the fact that people can do the Q&A piece, okay? Because it is live, and the live element is so important, right? A significant number of people that I talk to, the main reason why they go to live webinars is because of the live element of it, because they can enjoy talking to other people. So you definitely want to make sure you're outlining that. If you were doing like an automated webinar, you never want to say that this is a real session. You don't want to pretend that it's live because that's really inauthentic. But this is a live session, so I'm talking it up. That that's one of the reasons to go.
This is completely free. I think it's going to offer a ton of value. I think it's going to be a really good investment in your time and a really good investment in your career.
Now, again, big text, completely free. And this is kind of like the bat to try and get it into the finish line, is saying this is a good investment of your time and your career. I really want to make it very, very clear. And I genuinely believe this. In fact, I know this. I know the content in my webinar will be very, very helpful to anybody who's looking for a community job, because I don't know of any other webinar that does this. And I think my guidance is generally pretty useful, okay?
So make sure you click that button where you can go and register. Spaces are limited. So go and register, and I'll see you in the webinar.
And spaces were limited, okay? So, you know, you don't want to lie about this. So, you know, the approach that I take generally is, you know, when we start getting towards like 100 registrations, I tend to close it off. Because once you've got over that, frankly, you've got too many people there. I think it can be a little bit overly complicated, okay? There often can be too much text scrolling through. And one of the benefits of saying spaces are limited is it adds a scarcity element, right? You want to make people feel that they've got to kind of get in there and register. But you've got to be careful with this as well, because if you lean too much on the scarcity element, people will just register and then never show up, okay? So you've got to make sure that you have a bit of a balance between them. So that's the video. Now, imagine, I'm going to reload the page. So this is what people see when they first come to this. And by the way, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier on is this all big red bar down here, okay? This is where the registration button would have appeared, but obviously the webinar has expired, so that's the reason why you see that, okay? Just in case you're unclear about that. So let's now assume that someone's come to the page, and they have they've not watched the video because they're at work or they're on the bus or whatever it might be, and they can't watch it. So they decide that they're going to go through and read the text. And like I say, a small number of people are usually going to go and actually watch the video. Now at the top, first of all, I always like to put free webinar. Just drive it home. This is a free webinar. That's the type of content that we've got. And here we have a big headline, not sure how to level up in your community management career. So it's a question. Now, the question, this is important for a couple of reasons. One is, again, I want to make sure that the goals of the webinar, the kind of the script of the video is going to kind of resonate through the text that we're going to see. And the first thing that they're probably going to see when they come up here is they're going to read this headline. Okay, this is going to be the first thing you're going to read. Now, I did put on here the title of the webinar, How to Get Your Dream Community Job, and the page just didn't convert very well. People weren't registering as much. I was getting kind of like a 20% sign-up rate, and if you can see over here, like I wanted to get it up close to what it is here, which is 28%. So I decided to change this to a question, because then what you're doing is you're soliciting a response, even though they're not going to say out loud, you know, yeah, I'm not sure. You're asking a question, and therefore they're going to be a little bit more engaged with the content. So what most people do when they read content is they first of all will read the headline, right? And this is the same with blog posts or anything else. Then what they do is they're going to spin all the way through the page and just take a gander at what's on it, right? Now, let me ask you a question. As I spin through this, what is something that you notice about this? What are the things that you're probably seeing? Let me go through this again. And I'm asking you, right? So let's go and have a look. What are you seeing? Well, one of the things I hope you're seeing is that the content is easy on the eye. It's kind of broken up into pieces. There's some text here. There's a box here. There's some headings, some icons, a little book there. There's a picture of this ugly guy down here, right? That's kind of what we're seeing. This is really important. If it was a big wall of text, they wouldn't read it, okay? So people evaluate the formatting of your page first, and if they find it looks readable, it's not going to be too much work to kind of go through and read, then they're likely to read it. So that if the headline captures them and they've done this and it looks like it isn't a big giant wall of text, then they're probably going to read it. Okay, so that's really, really important. Make sure the text is nice and big, that it's spread out, and we'll go through some of these pieces as we go through this video. Okay, all right. So let's go through, and I'm going to read through the text fairly quickly to give you a sense of how I've structured this. But this is all by design. So again, are you thinking about your next community gig? Right? You might want to take your first steps into a community man. Actually, let me just make this bigger so you can see it, because it's a little bit small, isn't it, people? That's a lot easier on the old eyes. All right, you may want to take your first steps into a community manager advocacy role. You may want to get to the next rung in your career and take on a more of a director level role where you are responsible for an overall community initiative and team. You might be thinking of switching careers into the rather exciting world of community. So at this point, again, we're kind of getting them to think about where they are. And because if they're not aligned with these kinds of considerations and questions, this webinar is just not for them. And I would, honestly, if they were there next to me, I'd say, don't bother registering. It's just not going to be interesting to you. Now, again, this is also spaced out. Look at this big piece of white space here and white space here. This makes it easier to read, okay? Companies around the world like Lego, Sephora, Microsoft, right-click menu. Lego, Sephora, Microsoft, Harley-Davidson, and others are seeing the power of communities. They need great people, and that should be you. Big smiley face. So this is now getting over that the industry's hiring. and that people are looking for people. And this is true. Like, I've seen significant investment going into communities, and they're looking for good people, right? Finding a new role can be pretty stressful, though, especially in these current uncertain times. Now, as I record this webinar, and when I recorded, as I record this video, and when I did this webinar, this is in the midst of COVID-19. So people are stuck at home, they're spending their lives inside, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the economy and hiring and the future of their job and all the rest of it. So what I didn't want to do with this copy was to go into fear factor and start saying, with COVID-19 impacting everybody, you should probably think about coming to my webinar. Because I think that's frankly, it's a horrible thing to do, to kind of use fear as a means to get people in. I just wanted to really touch on the fact that we are living through uncertain times. They can come to their own conclusion. I don't want to insult their intelligence about what I mean by that, and that there is some stress. So I wanted to recognize that without being gratuitous or taking advantage of people. Okay, so you want to make sure that when you get out there, you're in the best possible position to present yourself, your experience, and what you can bring. Well, I think my new webinar can help. In it, I'm going to share concrete guidance of every step of the recruitment process. Now, this is bolded for a reason, okay? Because at this point, just before this big white space here, this has all been about aligning them with the topic and getting them interested, setting the stage for the fact that there is an industry out there that is looking to hire. At this point, they should be, hopefully, kind of interested. They're like, okay, this sounds interesting. So what's in your stupid webinar is the question I want them to be asking. Now, this point is where we go into the value. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about value because this is really important before we go on. There are some people out there that do webinars that are terrible. And the problem with their webinars is that they have an hour of content, and it's really, really kind of like scratching the edges, teasing away at something exciting, but they never go deep enough. They don't give that person who's at the webinar a really good chunk of really exciting, valuable, unique information. So what happens is they do that for the hour-long webinar. They spend the entire time getting people pumped up about an outcome, and then at the end of the webinar, they go and sell you their mastermind course, their training course, and it's always, the number always ends in a 7, right? It's $1,997 or $497, whatever it might be. I think that's a really, frankly, shitty thing to do, right? I think if you're going to invite people to a webinar, you need to give them a ton of value without any sale, right? That's the whole point of it. Now, this is not to say that you don't sell things. I sell things in my webinars. Not all of them, but some of them. But I want people to go there, and if they don't buy it, they can say, wow, that was really, genuinely a valuable use of my time. And I would argue with this one, going back to my data, the fact that people stuck throughout the entire session and the fact that we had 60%, just under 60% of people watch the entire webinar and it got the 9 5-star ratings, then people got that. And that's what I want. I'm certainly not going to subscribe to this view of, oops, sorry, I didn't share my screen. Look, this is what I was actually showing you without pressing the button, right? The fact that people stayed for the full, session here, it got the 9 5-stars, it got the 60% there. I believe that the session was valuable to people, okay? A professional would cut out the last minute, but I ain't a professional, obviously. So I think this session was genuinely useful for people. So what I want to make sure is that I do that with every one of these webinars. And this point in the copy is where you go through and get over the value for the people who've not seen the video. Now, remember in the video up here, we went through kind of all the bullet points of what's in it, but they haven't seen that, okay? So this is where I go, I'll cover how to expand and refine your experience, decide on what you want, build your resume, find the ideal role, prepare for the interview, deliver the interview, and more. Now, all of this detail, a lot of people who kind of new at building webinar landing pages will probably put this up here. But the thing is that if you're not sure whether this webinar is solving a problem you're interested in, which is the point of the first bunch of paragraphs, then if you start shotgunning out information about what's in your webinar, they're just going to read this and feel overwhelmed and just not pay attention, okay? So this is the reason why I lay out in this specific order. All of this is tuned specifically for working as a community director, manager, advocate, or evangelist. I will also, now that, by the way, before I go on, this is really important too. Because what I'm saying here is I don't want people to think that I'm just repurposing existing content for how to go and get a job and just putting community professional into the title of the webinar. This really is designed just for this industry, just for this kind of profession. So I wanted to make sure that that's very clear there. I will also cover what employers are often looking for and also what they don't want. Now, the reason why I mention that is employers are always talking about what they want, right? That's what a job description is. But what they often don't talk about is the things they want to avoid. And that's kind of what I put into the webinar here. Now, okay. So let's go into this. Not only that, but I will send you my Getting Started kit. So this is when we start introducing the bonuses, right? This will include, and this is again deliberately bolded here, this will include a downloadable resume template, a downloadable guide pack with tips, and a set of interview tips. A set of interview tips and a raft of additional content, right? So it walks through the bonuses that I've included that we kind of covered in the video earlier on. And then this is what I want to be kind of like the clincher. And I'll also send you 2 free chapters from my brand new award-winning book, People Powered, in both audiobook and PDF format. Not only that, but I'm giving 2 copies of the book away to 2 lucky attendees. So at this point, what I want people to be thinking, right? And this is the final bit. This is entirely free and I hope you can join us. Smiley face to make me look like a human being, which I am mostly a human being, at least in the evenings. In the mornings, less of a human being, if I'm being honest with you, is I want people to be able to go through and read this, identify with the point of the webinar, see the industry need for it, go through an extensive level of value, bolt on all these amazing bonuses, then bolt on the free chapters from the book and some prizes, and then mention it's free. At this point, I'm hoping these people are all like wired and they're good to go. Okay. Now, I would always recommend that what you also include in your landing page is going to be a box that looks a little bit like this. This is where you go through, here's what you will learn. Because bullet points, some people just read bullet points and that's how they consume information. And this allows you to go into a little bit more detail. Like I couldn't embed all of this text kind of, where was it when I talked through it? Here, right? It'd be too much. So the bullet points are a good way of kind of encapsulating it into easier to read copy, okay? So different community roles, including directors, managers, evangelists, advocates, and relations. Discover what skills employees are looking for and what they don't want, how to design your resume, how to broaden out your experience and differentiate yourself from candidates. This is critical for standing out from the pack. How to find your ideal role via a broadening approach, which is a technique that I recommend to people in this webinar. And I built a training course that kind of goes into a lot more detail about this, and I talk about it there as well. The 5 key attributes for the interview, and then kind of the salary and the benefits package, right? So this is where, again, hopefully they've read this text, but this is reinforcing with a little bit extra detail about all the value that's in the session. And then this is kind of the dessert, right? This is all the extra stuff that I'm going to include, the resume template, the downloadable tips, nice, easy to read easy to view icons, a quick summary of everything, and off we go. And then finally, 2 attendees will also win a copy of People Powered. Now, you may be thinking, all right, Jono, when you talked at the beginning of this bit, you said you got to get over your credibility first. They don't know who you are. You haven't mentioned yourself in any of this, and that's true. Now, I've tried this before where you put like a bio up front of who you are and all the rest of it, and I found it's had like limited results. I'm still experimenting with this. In video form, I spent 10 seconds on it, and it was a very visual, quick overview of my background, and I put the pictures of me at conferences and whatever else. But what I found works well is actually put your bio at the end. Because when they've read all of this, they're kind of interested in it. And then at the end, I'm now going to kind of go through about what I do, the clients I work with, my experience, the books that I've written, the companies that I advise, all that kind of stuff. And then a nice big picture so they can get a sense of, what I look like and all the rest of it. And that's it, folks. So I know this was, a fairly longish session, but I think it's really important to get your webinar landing pages down. I think this is one of the most critical elements of running a webinar. And sadly, so many people get this wrong. Like I've been a guest on tons of webinars over the years. And I go and look at the landing page and it's like, this is not great. And then many times I'll get on the phone with them and kind of walk through some of the recommendations I've put here. So what I'd love you to do is I'd love to hear your tips, right? I don't profess to be an expert in this. This is what I've learned over the years. But in the comments, write down what you would recommend. Like, what do you think you should put into a landing page? Where do you agree or disagree with the approach that I've taken? Give me some other useful tips and examples of what you think would go into a great webinar landing page. And of course, be sure to like this video. I'm quite a new YouTuber as I record this, okay? I've been doing YouTube for a while, but I haven't really stayed up with doing a lot of videos. So if you like this video, if you think it's useful, that really helps me out. So I'd appreciate a like. And if you really want to seal a relationship, if you want to kind of date, if you will, then hit that subscribe button and then we can make it official. All right. All right, folks. Peace out.